The Fed prints money, buys government bonds, then charges taxpayers interest. Think about that for a second. The Federal Reserve creates money out of thin air, uses that money to buy government debt, then collects interest payments funded by your taxes. It's the world's most profitable magic trick, and you're paying for it. The Federal Reserve holds 14.7% of all US Treasury bonds, about $4 trillion worth. They didn't earn that money, they didn't save it, they printed it. Then they bought government debt with printed money. Now the government pays them interest, with your tax dollars. The government is literally paying itself interest funded by taxpayers. This is monetary madness, and today you're going to learn exactly how the scam works. Let's start with 2020. COVID hits, the economy shuts down, panic spreads. The Federal Reserve's response? Print trillions. In March 2020, the Fed's balance sheet was $4.2 trillion. By April 2022, it ballooned to $8.9 trillion. They more than doubled their holdings in 2 years. Where did that $4.7 trillion come from? They created it, literally. Digital money conjured into existence with a few keystrokes. And what did they do with this newly created money? They bought treasury bonds, lots of them, trillions worth. The government needed to borrow money for stimulus checks, unemployment benefits, and COVID relief. The Fed printed money and bought that debt. This is called quantitative easing. The technical term for we're making money up and buying government debt with it. And it's completely legal. It's policy. It's considered responsible central banking. Here's the mechanics of the magic trick. Follow closely. Step 1. The government needs money, so it issues treasury bonds. IOUs promising to pay back the borrowed amount plus interest. Step 2. The Federal Reserve creates new money electronically, not by printing physical bills, but by adding numbers to a digital account. Money that didn't exist now exists. Step 3. The Fed uses this newly created money to buy the treasury bonds from banks and primary dealers. Step 4. The government now has money to spend. The Fed owns bonds. Those bonds pay interest. Step 5. The government pays interest on those bonds using tax revenue. Your tax dollars flow to the Federal Reserve. Step 6. The Federal Reserve collects that interest, keeps some for operating expenses, and returns most of it to the Treasury as remittances. So the government borrows money that was created out of nothing, pays interest on it with tax revenue, and gets most of that interest back. But not all of it. The Fed keeps a cut. And the real cost isn't the interest, it's the inflation. When the Fed prints $4.7 trillion, that money enters the economy. More money chasing the same amount of goods means higher prices. That's inflation. And inflation is a tax on everyone holding dollars. Your savings lose purchasing power. Your paycheck buys less. Everything gets more expensive. That's the real cost of the Fed's money printing, not the interest payments, the destruction of your purchasing power. From 2020 to 2022, the Fed printed trillions. From 2022 to 2024, inflation hit 40-year highs. Coincidence? No. Cause and effect. The Fed financed government spending by printing money. You paid for it through inflation. Your groceries got 25% more expensive. Your rent went up 30%. Your car cost 40% more. That's the inflation tax. And it hit hardest on people who couldn't afford it, the working class. In June 2022, the Fed realized they'd created too much money. Inflation was out of control. So they started doing quantitative tightening, shrinking their balance sheet. Instead of buying bonds, they started letting bonds mature without replacing them, essentially removing money from the system. By 2024, the Fed's balance sheet dropped to around $7 trillion. Still double what it was pre-COVID, but down from the peak. But here's the problem. As they reduce holdings, someone else has to buy those bonds. And with less Fed buying, yields have to rise to attract buyers. Higher yields mean higher government borrowing costs, which means more tax dollars going to interest. The Fed created a trap. Print money to buy bonds, causing inflation. Stop printing to fight inflation, causing higher interest rates. Either way, taxpayers lose. Now let's talk about the interest. The Fed holds $4 trillion in treasury bonds. Those bonds pay interest. Let's say average yield is 3%. That's $120 billion annually in interest payments. Where does that $120 billion come from? Tax revenue. The government taxes citizens to pay interest to the Federal Reserve on bonds the Fed bought with printed money. Think about the absurdity. The Fed created money, bought bonds, and now collects interest paid by taxpayers. It's a closed loop that enriches the banking system while extracting wealth from citizens. Yes, the Fed returns most of that interest to the Treasury, but not all. They keep operating expenses, and more importantly, the inflation created by money printing is the real tax, one that's never returned. Why does this system exist? Because it gives politicians unlimited spending without immediate consequences. Politicians want to spend money they don't have, but raising taxes is unpopular. Borrowing from the public has limits, so they borrow from the Fed, which prints money to buy the debt. It's politically perfect. Politicians get to spend, the Fed enables it, and the cost, inflation, shows up later, after elections, blamed on supply chains or corporate greed instead of money printing. The Fed is the enabler of infinite government spending, and taxpayers are the ultimate losers. But it's not just domestic. The dollar is the global reserve currency. When the Fed prints trillions, it affects the entire world. Emerging market currencies collapse against the dollar. Commodity prices spike globally. Other countries import American inflation. Countries holding dollar reserves watch their wealth get diluted. The Fed's money printing is a form of global taxation. Every country holding dollars pays for American government spending through inflation. It's the most powerful economic weapon in history, and the Fed wields it casually. What happens when the Fed's balance sheet is permanently elevated? When $7 trillion in printed money circulates forever? Asset bubbles. Stocks, real estate, everything inflates because there's too much money chasing assets. The wealthy who own assets get richer. Working people who don't own assets get priced out. Debt dependency. The government becomes addicted to Fed money printing. They can never return to fiscal discipline because the economy is now built on cheap printed money. Currency debasement. Each round of printing makes dollars worth less. Long term, the dollar loses purchasing power. Savers get destroyed, foreign holders get robbed. This isn't sustainable, but it's profitable for the short term. And in politics and central banking, short term is all that matters. The Federal Reserve holds 14.7% of all US Treasury bonds, about $4 trillion worth. They bought those bonds with money they created out of nothing. Now they collect interest on those bonds paid by your tax dollars. It's financial alchemy. Create money, buy debt, collect interest, return some of it, keep the rest, and let inflation tax everyone. The government borrows from itself using printed money, and taxpayers fund the interest. During COVID, the Fed doubled its balance sheet, $4.7 trillion created in 2 years. Then inflation hit, so they started shrinking the balance sheet, causing higher interest rates. Either way, you lose. Inflation destroys your purchasing power. Higher rates make government debt more expensive. Your taxes fund the interest. The Fed profits. Politicians spend freely. This is the Federal Reserve's magic trick. Print money, buy debt, charge interest, let taxpayers cover it through inflation and taxes. And the best part? It's all legal. It's policy. It's how modern central banking works. The Fed created $4 trillion out of thin air, and you're paying for it. Every time you buy groceries, every time you pay rent, every time you pay taxes. Welcome to monetary policy. Population, everyone. Cost, everything.